Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Jaya Prabhupada Jagat Guru Srila Prabhupada Nitai Gaura Hari Bol Nitai Gaura Hari Bol Jagat Guru Srila Prabhupada ki Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Srimad Bhagavatam, no Skanda, 14th chapter Adhyay, text 39. Sangvatsarante hi bhavan Samvatsarante hi bhavan Samvatsarante hi bhavan Eke ekaratrang mayeshwaraha Ekaratrang mayeshwaraha Rang satyapatyani chate Rang satyapatyani chate Rang satyapatyani chate Bhavishyanti aparani bo Bhavishyanti aparani bo Bhavishyanti aparani bo Canto 9, 14th chapter, 39 verse. Samvatsarante hiva ekaratam Rang satya satyani chate Vishyanti parani bo Rang satpatyatini chate Bhavishyanti aparani bo Samvatsarante hi bhava Tramayeshwara Rang satyapatyani chate Bhavishyanti aparani bo Matajis Samvatsarante hi bhava Ekaratram Maheshwara. Shabdart. Sangvatsara ante. At the end of every year. He, indeed. Bhavan, your good self. Ekaratram. One night only. Maya, with me. Ishvara, my husband. Rangsyati, will enjoy sex life. Apatyani, children. Cha, also. Te, your. Bhavishyanti, will generate. Aparani, others. One after another. Bo, O my dear king. Anuvad. O my dear king, you will be able to enjoy with me as my husband at the end of every year, for one night only. In this way, you will have other children, one after another. Please repeat after me. O my dear king, you will be able to enjoy with me as my husband at the end of every year, for one night only. In this way, you will have other children, one after another. Tatparya. Although Urvashi had adversely explained the nature of woman, Maharaj Purarava was very much attached to her, and therefore she wanted to give the king some concession by agreeing to be his wife for one night at the end of each year.
हरे कृष्णा। हमारे बहुत सौभाग्य है आज हमारे सम्मान श्रीमद् भागवत कथा कर रहा है श्रीपाद गौर हरि प्रभु। गौर हरि प्रभु पाकिस्तान से हैं, तो अभी लंदन में सेटल है। उन्होंने पिछले 35 साल से अधिक समय कृष्ण भक्ति में युक्त है। बचपन में यंग लाइफ से उन्होंने जो पढ़ाई करते थे उसी टाइम इस्कॉन में आकर पूरा खुद को समर्पित कर दिया, और तब से लंदन में प्रचार करा है। भक्ति वेदांता मैनर मंदिर का जुड़ा हुआ है। पिछले 25 साल से वहाँ का जो भी राधा गोकुलानंद उनका ड्रेस करते हैं, और श्री भक्तिचार्य स्वामी गुरु महाराज का जितना सारा रिट्रीट बाहर में है सब प्रभु ऑर्गेनाइज करते हैं। उन्होंने जितने भी लंदन में रहता है, लेकिन उनका दिल पड़ा रहता है उज्जैन में। गुरु महाराज प्रकट होने के बाद ये मंदिर को कैसे फाइनेंशियल आधार तरीका से मदद कर सकते हैं, इसके लिए बहुत सोचते हैं। तो हम धन्यवाद देना चाहते हैं। उन्होंने सपरिवार ये आए हैं। राधे के माता जी भी एक साथ नहीं, माता जी उनको भक्ति मत लेकर आए हैं, और बहुत सुंदर 2 बच्चा है। एक है नितई और चैतन्य। बड़ा है नितई, छोटा है चैतन्य। तो प्रभु जब यंग था तब गुरु महाराज सेक्रेटरी थे, अभी भी उनका चैतन्य भी गुरु महाराज का बहुत दिन सेक्रेटरी था। तो उनका पूरा परिवार गुरु महाराज उज्जैन मंदिर के लिए समर्पित है। तो हम उनको आभार प्रदर्शन करते हैं। 3 बार हरि बोल, हरि बोल, हरि बोल, हरि बोल। श्रीपाद गौर हरि प्रभु की जय।
Magyanatamandasya Gyananjana Shlaka Chakshu Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Okay. Better? Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Maharaj insisted I give class, although I tried to petition him that I'm not a good speaker or well-versed or qualified to give class. But anyway, Maharaj insisted. So I don't know if, sorry, I'm going to speak in English mainly. So will you be able to translate, or should I speak in Hindi? Okay. Very nice. Yeah, Maharaj insisted I give class, so I'm seeking your blessings today. You're all very senior to me, so maybe I should go slow, no? So they can translate as well. Okay. So you're all very senior to me, and I'm seeking your blessings today. Okay. I've been asked to speak on this verse, just in the sort of run-up to this verse. It may be interesting just to sort of familiarize ourselves with what's happened. Oh, okay. Yeah, okay, that's simultaneously. Okay, fine. So Rasi is a apsara, right, from heavenly planets, and she was cursed to take birth on the Earth planet. And in time, she was cursed, and she was accompanied by 2 lambs, which represent her children. And she met with King Urva, right, and became attracted to the king. And likewise, the king became attracted to her. And they wanted to enjoy, right, in a sexual relationship. And but, you know, she had a condition as well, right, which you can, in previous verses, Prabhupada explains what that condition was. And I suppose, I was just thinking back, these pastimes in the Bhagavatam, what are they trying to teach us, really? Right? There's a lesson, of course, right? And my understanding, of course, is that, well, yes, the futility of sense gratification, actually, right? And that's the main lesson that it's trying to teach us through this particular pastime. And of course, sense gratification, animals have a body that allow them, right, to engage in sense gratifications. Human beings do not, right? You'll know that, of course, there are very limited ways in which you can give pleasure to this body. Right? You can have somebody massage your body and feel some relief, right? Or in other ways, very limited ways, in fact, to give pleasure to the body. And there are innumerable ways in which you can actually give pain to the body. Right? Right? Simply, you know, an example, you know, you bang your thumb with a hammer. There's so much pain is there, right? And even through the course of life, you know, the body gets old, pain is there. So numerous ways in which you can inflict pain on the body, but very limited ways in which you can actually seek enjoyment through this body. Right? And of course, it's a little interesting, maybe a little bit contradictory, because we're all pleasure-seeking beings. Nobody runs after pain, of course. Right? We're all seeking some form of pleasure. And being embodied persons, we try to seek pleasure through the senses and this body. Right? And actually, what is enjoyment? Right? I mentioned that animals they're far better suited for sense gratification. So, for example, monkeys can have, sexual relationships 12 times in a day, right? Because their bodies are suited like that, right? And many species will give, they give offspring to maybe 6, 10, 12 offsprings are there. But that's not the case for humans, of course, right? In general, humans, we give birth to, the mother will give birth to one child, right? And even then, so much anxiety is there, right? In terms of bringing up the child, the maintenance. But in animal life, that's not theirs, right? Nature takes care of that, right? All the maintenance of baby monkeys in this case, right? Nature automatically takes care of that. But we try to seek pleasure, as I mentioned, from the body, enjoyment, right, through this body and senses. But the real enjoyment, of course, is internal. It's with the soul. Spirit soul is actually that enjoys, right? And it's that enjoyment comes through connecting with the Supreme Personality of Godhead, right, by rendering devotional service, right? So enjoyment, real enjoyment or true enjoyment, is not through the body, but is actually a function of the soul, right? And and here this pastime kind of illustrates actually how we can become entangled, right? The king became infatuated with Urvasi, and likewise, right? And through that infatuation, actually, there's so much suffering, right? Become more and more bound, in fact, right? The verses previous to this describe the nature of women, right? And which I won't go into so much here. And Prabhupada explains that, I think is mainly, the way I understood it is that, of course, devotee girls, devotee women, that's not the case at all, right? And in the previous verses, Prabhupada explains how actually he compares the nature of women to a fox, right? And how even if a faithful husband is there, a woman will, even at the slightest fault, right, she will leave him, right? And Prabhupada even Purpose goes as far as to say she'll kill him, right, and move on to somebody else, right? But that's the kind of nature of women. But that's from a material perspective, right? And then later on, in later verses, in fact, right, the king, Urvasi leaves him, in fact, right, because he breaks the condition for their union. And the king travels the world trying to find her, right? And he meditates on her form. And his meditation actually brings him through to a different yuga, a millennium, to Treta Yuga, right? And in his heart is revealed, right, the process for karma kanda, right? right? Sacrifice a yajna for the benefit or for the purpose of gaining fruitive results, right? So the king inaugurates this process, in fact, Prabhupada explains. And but of course, we know that in Kali Yuga, that's not our purpose. You'll be familiar with the verse, Yagne Sankirtane Praya Yayantihi Samedasaha, right? So in the Kali Yuga, in this age, the yagya is Sankirtan yagya, right? Congregational chanting of Hare Krishna and Maha Mantra, right? And somebody who is very fortunate, actually, Sumedasa, and intelligent, right, gets this opportunity, right, to come in contact with the holy name. And the holy name is so powerful, in fact. It's mentioned, you'll all be familiar with the pastime of Ajamil, right? Now, in those days, of course, in civilized society, parents would name their children, give them the name of God or Krishna, one of the names of Krishna, right? So that, in this case, Ajamil, he named his son, as you know, Narayan, right? And constantly throughout the day, he would be chanting Narayan, right? Narayan, have you had your food? Narayan, wake up. Narayan, you need to do your studies. Narayan, right? Every day, every moment of the day, he'd be constantly chanting the name Narayan, right? Now, of course, you could describe this as namabas, chanting, right? Shadow chanting. And of course, when the time came to leave his body, he called out for his son, Narayan, right? But simply by chanting Narayan, he was protected, right? As you know, the Yamadutas appeared, right, to take him. And they were confronted by the Vishnudutas, right? So this had never happened before, of course, right? This is the first time that the Yamadutas had actually been confronted by these celestial beings. And as the story goes, you know that, well, the Vishnudutas explained that actually Ajamil was outside of the jurisdiction. Why? Because he chanted Narayan, right? Even though he was not intending to chant the name of Krishna as such, right? But just a shadow name, Krishna is obliged to give protection, right? Right. Krishna is obliged to give protection, right? Even though he was not consciously chanting Krishna's name. But so that demonstrates the power of the holy name, right? So that we're all here chanting, and we may not be chanting. At least I know for sure I'm not chanting on a pure platform. I have my bead bag in one hand and my phone in the other hand, constantly looking at messages, right? But that's not to, I suppose, it's not to encourage that practice. Of course, we want to reach or attain the level of pure chanting, right? But just simply by chanting, right, the power of chanting the holy name is there still. It gives protection, full protection, right? As I mentioned, you have to be a greatly fortunate person to come into contact with the holy name. And we know Lord Nityananda's mission actually is to distribute the holy name all over the world. His mission is to inundate, right, the world with the holy name. And of course, Prabhupada himself went round the world 11 times, right, propagating the chanting of the holy name. Right. So it is only by good fortune, and I consider myself to be very fortunate to be here amongst yourselves, to have your association, and I'm sure, for me, everybody here actually has a journey, right? If you actually think back, what brought you to Krishna consciousness, right? How did you come into contact with the holy name? It may seem like, coincidence, right? But actually, it's not. It's actually I suppose, a divine arrangement, actually, right? Through Prabhupada's mercy, right? That we came into contact with the holy name. Prabhupada created so many centers throughout the world to enable living beings, living entities to come into contact with devotees and the holy name. Right? And so, yeah, it's not by coincidence, right? And I'm sure each of you have a story you could like to share. In my own case, if I may indulge myself a little, in my own case, when I think back, how did I come in contact with the holy name? Yeah, and so in my own case, as Maharaj mentioned, I took birth in Pakistan, in a Muslim family. Jai Shri Shri Gomita Ki Jai Jai Shri Shri Radha Madan Mohan Ki Jai Jai Krishna Balaram Ki Jai Jai Nrsimha Bhagwan Ki Jai Jai Jagannath Baladev Subhadra Maharani Ki Jai Jai Shri Prabhupada. Yeah, I'm the most unlikely candidate, in fact, you could say, coming from a Muslim background. And however, although I was born in Pakistan, my parents emigrated to the UK in 1965, and that generation, they mainly engaged in manual work, sort of factory work. My mother, she worked in a factory making, I think it was handbags, in fact. And there were other Indian ladies there who worked in the factory. And in those days, they would bring their own food from home, right? And have lunch. And in those days, they would all get together and share their food, in fact. So my mother's friends, Hindu ladies, they used to give her these sweets, right? So she accepted them. She didn't need them. She, in the back of her mind, I think she felt that, well, they were probably offered to demigods, and she wouldn't need them. But then she used to come home, and then she used to give me the sweets. I always had a sweet. I still have a sweet tooth. So my best, kheer. So I used to enjoy eating those sweets, and so maybe you could say that's how the initial seed was planted. So I had maybe the mercy of Hanuman Prasad or Lord Shiva Prasad. These nuts and gadgery that they would offer. And then, many years went by, in fact, and then you come into contact with a devotee somewhere, right? And in my case, it was in the West End, in London, and we were young boys, me and my brothers, just sort of hanging around, and we came across a devotee who was giving out records. You may be familiar with the Radha Krishna album, and in those days, it was CDs didn't exist. It was the vinyl record, and as excuse me, as a young teenager, I had my record collection, and So it caught, just the cover caught my attention. It was a very colorful cover, a picture of Radhalan and Ishvara. Right? So that caught my attention, and so yeah, I gave a small donation and purchased that record. And we used to play, took it home, and one of my favorite tracks back in those days was the Govindam prayers. Right? And we used to play that really loud. and now I realize, now you come to the temple here, and every temple you go to in the morning, they play Govindam prayers loud. So I was kind of, we used to play that record very loud in the house. And then, again, a few years go by, right, and something else happens. So my point is, you have to sort of, these are not isolated events. You could see them as isolated events, right? But actually, if you join them up, you think, hang on, there's something else is going on here, right? Actually, it's not coincidence, right? And then in my case, a Muslim boy marries a Hindu girl, right? Which was also somewhat of a taboo in those days. And maybe still is a taboo here. So, but anyway, so, that's attraction for you, right? And I won't bore you with those details. And then one day, actually, I'll kind of fast forward a little bit, actually. I met Guru Maharaj at Bhaktivedanta Manor. And me and my wife, we were studying, actually. We were already married by then. And we were studying and working at the same time. And so Guru Maharaj asked me, he said, what do you want to do after you finish your exams? So like most students, I just kind of blurted out, I'd like to go traveling. So then Guru Maharaj said, oh, wonderful. Why don't you come traveling with me, right, for a year? And then I said, oh, okay, I just jumped at the opportunity. Sure, Maharaj, I can do that. And then when I was driving home, I thought, this was just a casual conversation, right? And or at least I took it as a casual conversation. And maybe Maharaj didn't mean that, actually, right? So I kind of dismissed the idea, I was working, I dismissed the idea of traveling with Guru Maharaj. And then my wife, she was the first one to say, actually, you should go, but, who listens to the wife? Of course. So then I had some friends in brahmacharis in Radhalaneshwar temple. I sought their advice. And they also said, I should go, right? I can always come back and get another job. This was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, right? Just go. Right? So now I was like puzzled. Why is everybody telling me to just go? But anyway, so as it would be, I resigned and I left my job, and I joined a group. Guru Maharaj would organize a pilgrimage tour around September time, right? And they would travel from Mayapur, Jagannath Puri, Vrindavan, like that, for about 3 months. So I joined that group, and I'd never been to India. I'd never stayed in a temple. This was a totally new experience for me, right? So I was in Mayapur, Iskcon headquarters. I wasn't sure what I was supposed to do, but anyway, I found myself in Mayapur. And then one devotee was actually his servant secretary of Guru Maharaj, American boy. He had to go back to the States. So then Guru Maharaj was looking for another secretary and servant. And I didn't know at the time, but he had asked Priyavrata Prabhu. I'm sure you will know Priyavrata Prabhu. Right? Him and his wife spent some time in Ujjain. Right? And then Priyavrata Prabhu for some reason, even today, I don't quite understand, recommended, he gave Guru Maharaj my name. Right? And but even Guru Maharaj at the time, and later found out, it's a little bit doubtful. But anyway, and then Prabhupada said, no, he'll be fine, I'll be fine. So here was an opportunity for me that I'd never been, as I said, I'd never been in a temple, I'd never been to India, I'd never had a close association of a sannyasi, or what to speak of what a sannyasi is even. And I was in Guru Maharaj's association for about, it was like 18 hours of the day, from 4 o'clock, 3:30 in the morning, wherever he went, I just went. Would serve prasadam all the way until 9, 10 o'clock in the evening. Right. And in that way, we traveled in India. And then I had to come back to the UK to sit some exams. And being in that association on the one hand, and then suddenly finding myself in a library trying to study, it was just impossible. This is never going to happen. Anyway, I found out that Guru Maharaj was in, I think it was France actually. It was in France. And excuse me, I decided at the spur of the moment I would just go to France. Right? So I found a Back to Godhead magazine, and the address of Paris Ishwara Temple was in there. And I took the magazine. I phoned up the temple. Balaram, his secretary at the time, picked up the phone, and he was like, "Yeah, sure, just come." Right. So I quickly packed a suitcase, left a message for my wife that I was going, and purchased a ticket at the airport and made my way to France. All I had was actually just the address. Anyway, I eventually got to the temple, and then Guru Maharaj, the following day, we traveled to New Mayapur. Right. So in this way, actually, I had this, for me, it was a very rare and unique opportunity. Right? So I do consider myself very fortunate, right, to have had that opportunity. Right? And it's only through the grace of the spiritual master and the devotees that we can make any kind of spiritual advancement. And so for me, this was a unique opportunity. Right, in the very sort of formative stages of my own Krishna consciousness. Then, Maharaj mentioned I had blessed with 2 boys that Guru Maharaj named, Nityananda, the older one, and Chaitanya, the younger one. And you all know Chaitanya, of course. He's with us today. And I'll maybe finish up on something that Guru Maharaj would often say in the company of other devotees. He would often say, actually, he would kind of say, he'd say, he'd say, express that he'd miss the time when I was traveling with him. And he'd missed those times that when I was traveling with him. And then he would add that, well, if you weren't married, then you could come traveling with me and then be my secretary. And then, when Guru Maharaj would have that sort of laugh and he'd grin, and it was like such a merciful kind of look that he'd give you. And then he'd kind of chuckle a little bit. And then he'd say, Guru Maharaj would say, well, if you weren't married, you probably wouldn't have been a devotee. So I'll leave you with that short story. You can make your own conclusion from that. So if that's okay, I'd like to end here. If you have any comments, but please forgive any mistakes, my mistakes. Correct me and shower your mercy. I can take a couple of questions if you'd like.
You mentioned in the beginning you were taking prasad from your mother.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, from childhood you were taking some kind of offering, and then you met devotees on the streets, and then you got married after that. So you were in boyhood you met devotees, and then in adulthood you got married to an Indian, and then you said you fast forwarded into meeting Guru Maharaj. How did you? What was the middle point of getting married and then coming to Iskcon? I wanted to know.
Okay, should I speak about that? Okay, I'll briefly try to. Okay, so the middle point between getting married and coming to Iskcon. Okay, so yeah, we used to live in South London, and there was a Namahat center there, right? And my wife, coming from a Hindu background, she had that culture. She was exposed to that, and she used to go to Radhalaneshwar Temple in Soho Street, and I suppose you'd pray for, in her case, passing exams, big house, kind of things that I guess people pray for. And anyway, that Krishna has his own plan, of course, and that didn't happen, right? At least he didn't find success in exams. And actually, she came more interested, in fact. So she befriended a devotee, disciple called Manjari, actually, at the temple. And then she came to know that there was a Namahat center close to where we used to live. And then, I used to drop her off to the Namahat center and pick her up at the end of the program. I wasn't particularly interested at all. And then she said, oh, they also serve food, right, Sunday feast. So, okay, that caught my attention. And then, so I used to go when they started to serve prasadam. Right. So I think it was the halva. Iskcon halva converts everybody. It's the medium of change of heart. So in that way, I kind of got more attracted to devotees, right, and started to attend the full morning program. And then we used to come to Radhalaneshwar Temple as well, right. So that sort of arose, I suppose, the curiosity arose, right? So once, as you know, when you develop some faith, you take one step towards Krishna, then Krishna takes 1,000 steps towards you, right? And through that, by grace, that I met Guru Maharaj, right, actually. So, is that okay? Any other questions? There was one point when I actually, Guru Maharaj wanted to get some couples married in India, and they were Western couples, right? And so in those days, I don't think you could have marriage ceremonies in Mayapur. I don't know if you can do that now, but in those days it wasn't good, right? So Guru Maharaj was trying to arrange a pandal program, right? So it would be a preaching event, right? There were 2 Western couples, right? When they would have a Vedic fire sacrifice wedding, right? So for whatever reason, it didn't happen in Calcutta, and we shifted to Vrindavan, and And then, then Privata Prabhu made some arrangements in Varshana to hold the wedding. Right. So these two couples were going to get married in Varshana. And then at one point, Guru Maharaj turned to me and said, "Oh, you should get married as well." Right. I explained to Guru Maharaj, "Well, I'm already married." Right. He said, "No, properly." Right. So we again, Guru Maharaj's mercy, we 3 couples who then got married in Varshana in Radharani's palace, right? And that again, inconceivable mercy of Guru Maharaj, like that. Any other questions, comments? Right. Sorry? Oh. I don't think I necessarily understood so much. Right. It was just, Govinda Madi Purusham Tamaham Ajami, the tune, and that's what, somehow that just attracted me. Right. And that was almost the one track we used to play over and over and over again at home. Is that okay, Raj? Krishna Krishna. You want to say something? You want to add something? Okay. I'll leave it there. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, jai Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Jai Srila Prabhupada.